Town Attorney Carissa Eckhout,
Here.
and Town Planner Fred Box.
Here. Thank you. That's item number 2 on the agenda. Item number 3 is public comment on consent agenda and non-agenda items. If you have anyone in the public would like to come forth and speak to the commission on either items on the consent agenda or non-agenda items, this would be your opportunity. Come up and introduce yourself and give us your name and your address.
I am Eric Walker. I live at 625 East Hearthstrong Street. I've lived in Superior for most of my life, and I've seen it grow a lot. And as part of a government project for school, I've been looking into home rule and how it would affect our community. Based on my research, I'm in favor of it, and I'm trying to gather support. And the reason I'm here at the Planning Commission is to ask for your support and explain some of the benefits of planning in Superior. I'm also planning to present to the Board of Trustees 2 weeks from now. One of the biggest advantages of home rule is having more flexibility on setting taxes. For example, if the Planning Commission should decide to try to get a hotel in Superior, we could tax it, which could provide money for things like a dog park or a library. Since the Calmonte homes are finally going up, there might even be more demand for a hotel in Superior. Another benefit of home rule is the setting of the election date, which would increase voter turnout because right now it's in April, which is right next to the BVSD spring break. And since there are a lot of families in our town, a lot of the voters are gone. I think there are a lot of benefits to home rule in addition to the ones to planning. And I hope you'll support this proposal as it moves through the town approval process. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else wish to address the commission? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to item 4, the consent agenda, of which there's one item, approval of the two items actually. Approval of the October 20th, 2009 minutes and the October 27th, 2009 minutes. The chair would entertain a motion for approval of the consent agenda.
I have a couple of
Comments?
about it. Should we do that first? Or?
Yep.
So on page 4, the October 20th, let's see, I guess it's the third or fourth paragraph where it says Commissioner McCool's said and talked about the comprehensive plan. And at the end it says that, it all sounds fine and dandy. It's roughly what I said. The new development should maintain the existing grid, blah, blah, blah. And then it ends with a statement, an attempt has been made to do that. I didn't say that, and I'm not sure who said that or why that's in the minutes, but I don't want it under my name.
Okay.
Okay, that could be taken out. And then the same thing in the next paragraph. We're talking about the comprehensive plan, about extending the grid block the pattern and the traditional setback, building orientation, and then it says Remington Homes has shown some examples of roof forms that are reasonable. And I didn't say that, and I don't know who did, and I'm not sure who makes the decision that what they showed was reasonable or not. And if somebody said it, then by all means, let's put in who said it. But I didn't, and it sounds like, I don't know, just...
Yeah, keep in mind, Town Clerk Phil Harden did the minutes, and it was, as you can imagine,
Oh, I know. There's a lot
hours
of
and
paper
hours
going
and
on,
hours
yes.
of
Okay.
discussion, so...
So
but we'll go back.
If we could strike those, that would be...
We'll go back and...
Or else put it in context as to
Sure.
how it was said. That would be
Yep.
appreciated. And... that's fine. Solo is not that critical. Those are the two main ones. Thank you.
That was on the 20th, October 20th.
Yeah.
Those were in the October 20th.
You okay with the October
27th
27th?
looks fine, yeah.
Anyone else? Comments? So, Matt, do we need to reissue that or before we approve?
You can approve them with those changes, and we'll go back and make them, or we can bring them back, either way.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes based on the changes given them out tonight.
Okay.
Second.
I have a motion and a second.
I second it.
I have a motion, and it's actually Commissioner Hinkle was the, Vice Chairperson Hinkle was the
Okay.
second
Cool.
on the motion, so he beat you to it.
That's fine.
Next time, we'll catch you. There's a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed?
I'm just abstaining.
Abstaining. Commissioner Prestisator is abstained. Okay, so that's passed, the approval of the consent agenda. We move on to item 5, new business review and recommendation regarding the third amendment of the subdivision improvement for agreement for Calmonte. And Matt, do you have a presentation?
Yeah, just briefly, thank you. As you mentioned, we have a third amendment to the subdivision improvements agreement for the Calmonte subdivision.
Hang on one sec.
That's Fred's.
Oh, it's Fred's. I'm sorry. Sorry, my bad.
Oh, sorry.
We were ready to rescue a coat.
Rescue code, did somebody else?
It's okay.
Thanks, though.
This development is a 35-acre piece of property. It's currently zoned as planned development. It has two pieces, two components to it, a residential and a commercial component. The residential is a 75 townhome unit on 23 acres, and the commercial portion is a 12-acre piece that will need to come back through the planning process and the final development plan when it's ready. The final development plan for the residential piece was approved in 2002. At that time, when that and the PD were approved, we had a subdivision improvements agreement that was approved. Since then, we've had 2 amendments to that agreement, and the first was mainly in relation to the dissolution of districts 2 and 3. At the time, the agreement was also with those districts. When they were dissolved, we had to go back and amend it so that it was just with the town. And then the second amendment had to do with the commercial piece and the road that bisects that commercial piece, which is Caslon Street. At the time of the second amendment, the roadway was scheduled to be built, and the owner had requested that it be delayed until December 31st, 2009, to allow them more opportunity to plan the property and work to try to get users in there that works best for the property. We haven't been able, under the current economic situation, to bring forward a development for a final development plan for that commercial piece. With the pending deadline of December 31st coming up this year, we felt it did not make sense to just build the road just to have it built, but to plan the property better for the proper uses that we would all like to see there. And the owner, the applicant, has requested that the SI be amended again for a third time, delaying the road to be built with a deadline of December 31st, 2012. And Kirsten Beck, the owner's representative, is here. If you have any questions or if you'd like to add anything to it, but that's kind of in a nutshell what we're looking at tonight.
Okay. So nothing you want to present specifically. You're here. You can answer questions though. If,
Oh, absolutely.
Well,
okay, let's start. If you guys have, if there's any questions from the commission.
I'll start by saying, I know that the Caslon Street thing is not in place at this point. There's just a street cut out there along McCaslin. I made the mistake, almost turned in there all the time. So I know it's there. And certainly for the good of the community, I think it would be better if they had something more concrete in place. Obviously, economic conditions are what they are. It's a difficult situation, but I think it's probably for the best of everybody's interests at this point. Just an economic burden.
Okay.
I have no objection to what's being proposed. I think I prefer seeing a street go in once the understood uses and types of businesses and what the right layout would be. I think it's all very reasonable given the circumstances today.
Yeah, same. I'd like to see it happen with the development so that we have time to really plan all the fine details of it, so.
Matt, there was a comment under the pros and cons list about additional access point for townhome residents being delayed.
Yeah.
There isn't anything particularly unique about that access to McCaslin, unless I'm missing something, is there?
No.
It's just a little shorter route from
Yeah,
McCaslin.
yeah, exactly. I mean, you have access to the south still off of McCaslin,
Yeah.
and then off of Colton Road in addition to that, so.
Just want to make sure I wasn't missing something
No,
there.
The third building or buildings of the townhomes is in for permit or has been approved or something. Is
We
that-
have some minor line adjustments that we have to do first, and that's in the process of getting corrected. And once those are in place, then they'll submit for their.
Can you identify on the site plan as to which building that is?
Yeah, it is. It's actually it's tough to tell, but the lot that's closest to the fire station currently. So you have the street that dead ends right there. Coming off, you turn off Indiana, turn right onto Tierra Ridge, and head towards the fire station. And it's that last lot number 1. And it's a little difficult to see in that smaller site plan that we provided. But I've got a little bit larger one here if you'd like to
First.
take a look.
Final plat sheet 3 or 4.
So,
Is it one with the 7 on it? I thought
Yeah.
that's what I'm asking.
So,
Which ones you
it's easier to see.
There's lots 1 through 10 in
It's,
this one right here,
Tierra Ridge.
which is that one right
Yeah.
there. Okay? Up on the side plan.
No, it is, okay. Right on the end there.
Could have been.
And so, is it these two that are now built?
And this one.
And this one, right? Okay, so it'll be this one? Okay, all right. Okay.
Okay.
Commissioner McGinnis? Anything? Questions? This time we're just doing questions.
No, except I'm still not clear on where the building is just about to be built is.
It's this one. These are existing here.
So these are the models?
The models are,
Yep.
over there.
No, where you just planted.
Yeah, no, over here. These are the models over here.
Miles on
Yeah.
the other street.
They're on,
Just where your fingers now.
Valmonte.
yeah.
There's
These,
one
right?
set.
Valmonte.
There's one unit
These are
there
the
and one
models.
over on the other side.
These are existing. This is the new group.
Yeah, the lots are kind of hard to separate.
I'll come back to you.
Yeah, no questions.
Okay, I'm back to you.
So we're talking about delaying this piece?
The street.
The street construction.
That's one street.
Has everything else that we'd asked to get done, all the concerns that we had, been addressed? So the erosion stuff and the six issues that we discussed in August, have they all been addressed and we're happy with the way that they've been taken care of?
Yes.
Okay. So, I couldn't go build a road right now. So I guess I wouldn't expect somebody else to if there wasn't a reason to build it.
Is the letter of credit itself tied to the expiration date of the Second Amendment?
The letter of credit is, well, yes, it is tied to the expiration of when the road's to be built. That's exactly.
But it's going to be, it's a
Well, so we'll have
it's a
to-
requirement of the approval, is that they maintain the letter of credit.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
And we'll have to amend and reissue that.
As long as what we're not saying tonight is that that road doesn't need to get built ever, I'm okay with waiting.
No, it's just the delay.
Anything else? Okay. Any other comments? Okay. Seeing none. Would someone like to someone like to take a stab at a motion?
I would move to recommend approval of the third amendment to the Calmonte subdivision improvement agreement. And there are no conditions. Do you need any more specifics than that, Matt?
No, that's good. Unless there's anything in the agreement itself you'd like to change.
Yeah, I think, now's the time. Is the question, but I didn't see anything.
There's two triggers in the agreement as it currently stands: December 31st, 2012, or no certificate of occupancy is issued until the road is built. So we want to make sure that if they pulled a building permit, that they had to have the road done before a CO was issued.
For the commercial
Right.
plot?
I'll second. If we're still waiting.
We are. I was just reading through the amendment to make sure there wasn't something else that we wanted to make sure was in there. Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? No. Seeing none, I will call for a vote. All in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Is that it? Up? All opposed? None? It's unanimous from the commission. Thank you.
So is there a plan to ever build anything on a commercial property?
Someday. They have designated land for commercial development. Whether anything actually ever gets built. That concludes item 5 of the agenda. Moving on to item 6, staff announcements and miscellaneous.
Just a couple items. We received the formal application for the Rocky Mountain Fire Station Number 5 expansion, so that was sent out for referral comments today, actually. So we plan on, the question for the Plan Commission is, how do you feel about that first meeting in January? Do you want to hold that meeting, or would you rather delay any items until the second meeting in January?
What's the
The
date?
second, the first meeting in January
It's the
would
5th, I
be,
think.
that's like the
January
5th,
5th.
right? Yeah.
Is there anything else on the second meeting where then that kind of puts a couple things together on an agenda, or is that pretty
Well,
open too?
we're shooting to try and have the Rocky Mountain Fire Station expansion in January for sure. And then the Guardian Storage final development plan possibly in January also. So those two items, in addition to the land use code review, would be what we'd be looking at for January.
What would be the reasoning for not having it on the first meeting?
Just scheduling. I don't know what.
Yeah.
Everyone's
I'll be out of
holiday
town.
schedules.
I won't be there.
Who will be out of town, actually?
I think I will be on that day. Too.
Well, we'll shoot for that meeting.
Yeah. And I guess, is that a public hearing?
Yep.
Let's wait.
I'd say we wait.
Okay.
Yep. If it were just a regular meeting with a, review and not necessarily a public hearing, I'd say it would be fine. But since it's a public hearing, I think we should
Okay.
wait.
So we can still do the review of Chapter 16.
Sure.
Right.
Because that's just a work session.
Yep.
And then vacancy for the board is still out there. Deadline's tomorrow. so
Applications are due tomorrow.
due tomorrow, 5 o'clock.
Bob, applications are due tomorrow.
I heard.
I just have a question, because I'm not clear on how codified it got based on the discussion of the trustees. If someone is selected for that seat, are they actually prohibited from running then in the April?
No.
Okay. There was, I think, some confusion. Some people asked me about that.
Yeah.
And I said I couldn't quite answer it because I remembered discussion, but I couldn't think of how you'd possibly be able to codify that. So
One of the trustees has stated that,
he thought that was desirable.
right,
But on the other
but
hand,
there's nothing in the code.
yeah, I mean, on the other hand, it could also mean that someone who serves, then they get an idea of the scope of the job, and then they go in with their eyes wide open if they want to run, so.
Right.
Yeah, they probably won't though if they get appointed.
Ain't that the truth? Scare them away.
The phone will bring off the wall for a short period of time in their life.
Okay. Is that it for staff announcements?
Yep.
Nothing else? Okay. So we will adjourn the regular meeting of the Planning Commission, and we will call to a work session to order to discuss Chapter 16 of the Superior Municipal Code. Do you want to take us through?
Matt, lead this.
Yeah, I'll just go through the list here.
Do you? Is it helpful to have you closer to the mic?
You want to sit here?
On this one. How's that work?
Well, see if you guys are sharing or whatever.
I see. There's not 3 mics, there's 3 chairs, but 2 mics. Count.
Thank you. Okay.
All right, Article 15. Article 15 deals with public improvements, which is actual Article 21 of the current code. And point out that this article has remained generally the same. There were some typos that were fixed. There was some excess language in the current code, which is 16471, paren 2. They were taken out of the introductory paragraph for 1615, 10.2. So that's this second, the paren down there, 1615, 10. There was some introductory language there that was part of the original code. It was taken out as being superfluous, but this list, the following improvements list is the same. There was some redundant language in section 16.474, paren 1 of the current code, and it was removed in section 16.15.40 because it occurred in item C above that. So 16.15.40. Okay. So it was added. It occurs in paren C. So it was moved some of that language. Let's see. Section 16.15.50. Under the current code, the board must formally accept the public improvements. However, this is typically a responsibility of the manager and has been revised to reflect this.
Typically a responsibility of the manager where?
In most communities. What they do is basically it's based on, the engineering acceptance of the improvement, its status, the technical aspects of all that, the time that this improvement has been in place, and there's usually a period of time where it's under warranty or whatever by the contractor. Then at a certain point, it's determined that it's fine.
So-
It's gone through its warranty period, the town has inspected it, it's basically looked at as a technical operation for the management staff.
And we have a 2-year warranty period after the initial acceptance, so, which is a good length for a warranty period.
Yeah,
It's not typical in most communities.
yeah, most of them are here.
Warranties usually a minimum of a year. That's from landscaping all the way up to concrete.
We like our expansive soils here, so it's a good idea to at least have a 2-year warranty.
Yeah. Give her 5.
Yeah.
Ka-ching, ka-ching.
When it says formally accept the public improvements, that's upon.
But what it does is it accepts it as a responsibility of the town, it's ours to maintain it, whatever, and it relieves.
At the end of the warranty period, is that what it's
relieves
saying?
the contracting party of all obligations and connections to it.
Either way, that's ultimately a staff function anyway, right? I mean, so really, the manager is the.
Right.
Titular here.
I'm okay.
That's the
I'm
point at which your letter of credit would be released.
Right. All of that.
So I'm okay with that, but if you guys want to pull
I had a
it,
question.
if you want to pull it for later discussion. Anyone?
No, I'm fine.
Anyone? Okay.
All
right.
It's a pretty big change to the way things have been done, and I don't understand why it's been done the way it is done now, if it's,
Well, in practicality, does the board actually accept? Is there a motion to accept the improvements, the public improvements? I mean, how does
Or is
it
it completely a typo?
I guess,
functionally or practically? How does it actually happen?
Well, you have the initial acceptance. At the final acceptance, the board's informed that the development, the contractors met all the requirements of the subdivision improvement agreement and that recommendation, but it's not done at a formal meeting. There's no motion by the board to accept action.
There's no action.
There's no action.
They're just advised.
Right.
It sounds like that wouldn't change. Something
No.
that would still
Yeah,
go into the
no.
report.
Informed,
Okay. I'm okay with it. Okay.
So that
Is that the end of
pretty
our-
much takes care of
Article 15?
Article 15. That takes us to Article 16, which is dealing with temporary, special, and conditional use permits.
Okay.
So, which are like little subsets of zoning. We got a use by right. You got a temporary use, you need a permit. Special use, you're going to need a permit. Conditional use, you're going to need a permit. Okay. So what's been done here is try to clean up actually this is Article 6 of the current code. So there's been some work here to try to clean this up and to be clear about what these different permits are and what's being asked for when they apply for it, and then what's the process to do that. And so those things are kind of scattered around basically in the current code, particularly submittal requirements way out at the back end. And, you had to, it was a little bit scattered. And so the attorneys basically, tried to consolidate these 3 permit sections together. So under Number, I guess it's section 16131 of the current code was removed since it is noted that a permit is required in each section describing these activities. So that was sort of like a cover line. They decided to have it be very clear about that a permit is required for each of these three under each section. So that was, section 1610 was added temporary uses that are structures not attached by permanent foundations and temporary storage of structures that will ultimately be permanently anchored. This language was added to regulate structures being moved into town without a permit. So we had kind of a hole in the last language. If you brought a structure in town, you plunk it on a lot. It just sat there, and there was no oversight on that by the town. The oversight came when all of a sudden that structure was to be put on a permanent foundation or something like that. Then they would require a permit. But, so that was clarified. And then you were still...
This would cover, I'm sorry, this would cover someone buying an old house in Boulder and moving it into town.
Correct.
Exactly, right?
Which is, exactly what we have currently. Yeah.
In this code,
And,
that'll be-
it's this just saying you need a permit to do that.
Right.
Right, and then there's additional language as far as requirements that it be on a permanent foundation.
within a certain period of time.
Right.
Right, because the temporary use permit, which is what we're talking about here, would go over and lay out the stipulations for length of time, and
So it's-
usually that's based on kind of the parameters around the particular structure, what they want, what the person is planning to do, so you kind of set it up that way based on what they're planning to do.
So is there-
As long as it's
if you
not
were-
excessive, that's an issue if it's going to be excessive.
In order to get one of those permits, maybe I'm getting into the weeds here a little bit, but if you were going to request one of those permits, would there be prerequisites to that? Like, let's say you wanted to move one of these structures into the town, would you have to already own the land on which it was going to sit,
Either own the land or have an agreement with the landowner.
where it would be
where it was-
stored?
And would the permit require that?
So there's some affidavit or something that indicates
They
that.
have to provide proof that they own the property or that they have an agreement with the property owner
Like a lease or
to
whatever.
use the property.
A lease or something. Okay.
And what's the default amount of time a temporary use permit would be?
6 months.
6 months.
Okay, thank you.
And I assume that if we have the issue in town, they're grandfathered in, and this won't affect them? Is that true?
That is true.
So we have nothing but to leave that thing sit there?
Well, there might be some statutory language that we're looking at that we might be able to. But right now, we're still looking at it.
Still looking.
Is that thing abandoned?
No.
What was your question?
Are they just, is it abandoned?
I'd say it's
No.
abandoned, but
It's not abandoned.
it's not moving either.
Why are they not
Well,
The cost.
Is it on a safe foundation? I mean, a safe, it's
Well, it's on a,
on skids or whatever.
yeah, it's on skids.
All skids, yeah.
Yeah.
all the humps.
Just the cost to do the sewer was, I think, blew them away.
yeah, yeah.
Welcome to
It was
Superior.
more than they anticipated, yeah.
System development fees, yeah.
So they just said, never mind?
No, they continue to work on
So, money.
alternatives. They own a couple of pieces of property in town that they're trying to determine if they can get financing for to put it on. But it's been ongoing for some time now.
Yeah, no.
Okay, well, it sounds like a good add to the code, so.
Now, under a temporary use permit, under 16-1610, paren C, small c, if an objection is filed after posting a property for a temporary use permit, then there is a process of review by the planning commission. Otherwise, this is done by staff. So the attorneys clarified that.
So if somebody applies for a temporary use permit, the planning commission doesn't see it?
Unless there's an objection.
Unless there's an objection. It's basically a staff function. That's the way it has been anyways, a staff function. That's the way it is now. But if there's a protest, it triggers a hearing.
Yeah, I get it.
Okay.
So the applicant needs to post the property. That's what would trigger a protest if such is out there. Okay? Under section 16, 1620, the rest of the language for a temporary use permit is the same as in the current code. That takes us to section 16, 1630, for B, where we're dealing with a conditional use permit. Conditional use permit. This has been expanded by bringing the submittal requirements of the current code, which is section 16877, into this section. Okay. The next one is section 1630C. The procedure for a review has been clarified and expanded with a PC hearing. So a PC hearing on a conditional use permit. There's no board hearing. There's no board hearing for a conditional use permit, correct? Correct.
It's a decision by the planning commission.
Decision by the planning commission. And then on
We have some.
1630D, evaluation criteria, the attorneys added that. It's not in red on this, what do you want to saw, the compare document, but our attorneys are big on criteria for whatever we're going to approve, so they came up with these criteria. They just did not appear in red. I don't know why, but they didn't. Anyway, so it seemed like good criteria for me, so we didn't really hammer that one much. Are any questions on that?
No,
No.
that's good.
Next one, 1640. Now we get into special use permits, which is a conditional use permit is a use that would be generally allowed, or it's a little bit different in being a zone district. It just seems to be a little bit different. And we want to make sure that there's enough parking. There's a few things to make sure that use is going to work. Special use permit, though, is even a little bit more outside the purview of what's in the use list. It'll pop up on the chart as being a special use, just like a conditional use would pop up on the chart as a C rather as an S. So special use permits, though, are a little bit more deemed to be more of an impact. So therefore, you end up having procedures for reviews that are a little bit more extensive. In this case, it's not only the PC but the board. And you get into whole deals about time frames and all these kinds of things that around a special use permit. So under special use permits, once again, the submittal requirements have been slid into this section, which was 16876 of the old code. And then the procedure for review, which is 1640 paren C. The procedure for a review has been expanded and clarified with both planning commission and town board hearings. Section 1640D, the evaluation criteria, there was some in the old code, but that's been expanded by the attorneys. So that basically gets us pretty far on that one.
Fred, when they expand the criteria, do they work off the state?
They work off of whatever they can find in the statutory materials under the state code, but they also, like this law firm, uses criteria that they have seen or used in other communities, and that have sort of withstood legal scrutiny and case law. So a lot of this stuff pops out of, they kind of gather this stuff together, and it pops out of case law too.
Okay.
So that's how they. I mean, I'm not the lawyer, but I think that's the way they
Came
generally
up with a
things up.
list. Yeah.
That takes us to Article 17, which was Article 19 of the current code. This is basically streets and sidewalks. it's an additional section, or, that's, a lot of it has to do, it comes into play when you're doing a subdivision. These standards are here. Now, there's two places where standards occur, is in this Article 17, but also in the Town of Superior's roadway design criteria and standards, which is about that thick. Yeah, it's right there. Now, what the attorneys did was there's been in the past a fair amount of overlap between the code and this document, which was, I don't know, finished in when 2000 whatever.
2003.
So it's not an old thing. It's been around a little while, but prior to that, it was we didn't have a complete document as we do now in terms of the roads and street standards. So what they've tried to do is to try to eliminate some of that overlap in this rewrite of the code. And not all of the overlap is eliminated. And so you'll find that Article 17 will refer to that document. It will also list some things that you might also find in the document, in that document there. But at least in the end, it's coordinated a lot better now than it used to be.
What about, in this case, you've changed, for instance, this B3 changed from 12,000, that's vehicle
Per day.
per day,
Vehicles
right?
per day.
To 18,000. Shouldn't, instead of us specifying that in the code itself, shouldn't we simply reference what's in the roadway standard? So that if you make a modification of the roadway standard, you don't have to go back and change the code.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, it's sort of like I said, there's some overlap here, and this is an obvious one that, why have?
Right.
Yep. Agreed.
So, can we do that now as a comment, or I guess, are there other such examples in here where the attorney has lined it up with the current roadway standards, but in lieu of having to modify the code every time, we're simply referencing that you have to use the current adopted roadway standards criteria. Does that make sense?
It does. I think what we have to do is go back through this whole article and cross-reference it to the roadway standards, and then maybe at the end of our review of entire Chapter 16, just give an update to the commission on what we found.
Okay, well, or maybe we can just pull this and say, have you guys do that.
Okay.
Is that
Who's responsible for updating the roadway?
the town engineer? Or?
Town engineer.
Yeah, our consulting
And-
traffic, our traffic consultant, which is Alex Arnaud, and LSC, and then the town engineer and our public works director.
Now, that's maybe more aggressive, or this is leaning down the same path you're headed already, is figuring out what, if anything, needs to be in the land use code on this whole topic, because it seems like it'd be a lot cleaner if even if there's
You're
something
right.
in here
Yeah,
that's not in there,
Right.
but it could just as well be in there. Why not keep it really clear?
Yeah, I guess the question is why save some of this language?
And there may be something about the land use code that has specific content that should be in here on this, but
When it comes to this technical stuff, if it's in there, I don't think it needs to be in here.
Right.
But if there's something that's not in there, then it can be addressed here. That, zoning, like, for instance, let's say, for the next one, 16, 17, 30, access to lots. Maybe that's in there, maybe it's not.
right.
It's not referenced here, so I would suspect that it's not in there.
Well, but if it's but I guess in each case where it's not, it'd be good to consider where it belongs.
And
Or maybe
maybe
it may have just been an
amend the
oversight as far
Right.
as that went.
roadway standards.
I-
So I guess my only point would be if there are anything that we take out of the land use code no longer requires a public hearing for change, it becomes a staff change to that
roadway.
document. So just
Is that
as we're
true?
being
The roadway
conscious,
standards are controlled.
that means they could change it from 18 vehicle trips.
let's
I mean,
see.
I'm not sure I understand whether I care about that or not, but I mean, just want to keep in mind that things we take out of the land use code and put in that document, it sounded to me like it'd be, that's why I
Yeah,
asked
I
who
was-
maintains that document. And
The,
My comment was specifically related to it's kind of technical
Sure.
issues and not things
Cruiser
related to,
streets.
as you pointed out, that should stay in the land use code.
Right.
I don't know.
This version of the roadway and street standards was reviewed by the planning commission and adopted by the board.
Yeah.
So I'd have to check with the, I think any changes would then have to be reviewed by the planning commission and adopted by the board. But
That's
I'll
what we're doing.
double check.
That's what we're doing after Chapter 16. We're going to rewrite the roadway standards. So
If that's true, I have no objections.
That's good, because I want to make sure that the landscape strip got widened. I don't remember what happened with that. We lost all those trees on Rock Creek Parkway and the ones on McCaslin because the strip in which they grow isn't wide enough, or at least a lot of them anyway, once they hit a certain size. That was
You mean
at
in
least
the
one of the
median?
opinions of one of the, yeah. So there's that landscape strip, and then any separation you have between a sidewalk and a street needs to be wide enough to grow things.
Right, we've talked about that, and
Yeah, I remember that we spent a long time talking about that, and what is the right width then? Is it 5 feet? No, that's clearly not. Is it 10?
well, we've settled on 7, and I believe that's what's in the roadway standards, that landscape strip. That's what we settled on at the time. It
It actually shows up in
shows up somewhere.
1780D.
D.
Well, to the extent that the land use code can be its own advisory document to someone who picks it up and is looking for information, I think there are things that should remain in the land use code. And when you get into, again, these sort of technical things where we don't want to necessarily have to modify the land use code if you make a technical change, that's what I'm talking about. So, there's, I don't want those things to disappear necessarily out of the land use code, because as its own document, it's a good
It
reference.
sounds like if there's a technical change in that, does it still come before us?
And the roadway design standards? That, yes. I'm
Or is it kind of a
going to double
judgment
check
call?
on that, but
Okay.
since it was formally
Approved.
adopted by the board, any changes then need to come.
But ultimately, yeah, I mean, to me, a document like that, I mean, it did go to the planning commission, didn't it?
Mhm.
Yeah. But you're talking about subsequent changes, little
Like
things
these.
or big things or whatever.
Right.
I don't think we've ever gotten to a point where, we haven't gotten to a point yet where someone said, gee, this is a kind of a big deal. You ought to talk about it with planning commission and everybody else. We haven't really gotten there, because all we've been doing is using it as it was written back in '03.
Yeah, I think I would certainly agree with Chairman Craycraft that if that is not controlled the same way as the land use code, then I'd have a substantially different opinion about what
Right.
should stay in the land use code.
And I'll verify that.
Thanks.
So before we sign off on any changes that
Yeah,
are
let's-
suggested here, we should probably pull that.
Yeah, I think we should pull this whole section 17 and just have you do that review
Okay.
and make recommendations that way. I mean, we can talk about the specifics, these other specifics since we're here tonight, and see if there's anything else specifically we want to change, but as far as that kind of coordination between the two documents, we'd like to see that happen, I think.
Where do we end up here?
Article 18.
Utility.
Or you still want to jump
Well, I
to
have
Article 18, or you
One
want
real
to?
quick question on item 5 under 17.
Okay.
That's not really
Well,
relevant.
I think we can go through all 6 items in Article 17.
Okay,
So,
we leave off on what, number 3?
I don't know, did we even talk about 2, really?
No, what, number 2 was section 16, 17, 80. The charts in the current code, section 16, 418 were removed since they exist in roadway design criteria standards. Landscape strips requirements have been incorporated into subsection D. 1780, 80D. We've just talked about that. So here's an area where it's clarified as to what those strips are. And my assumption is, yeah, and they also occur in the roadway standards as well. But those old charts were,
See, I
Got rid
would,
of-
like, just as an example, maybe I'm beating a dead horse here, but to have the chart in the roadway standards, to me, seems perfectly acceptable, but I think it still should say in the land use code, you must meet the requirements as enumerated in the roadway requirements or
Right.
whatever, right? I mean, I don't want that language just so it should disappear from the land use code, that there's something else you're referencing.
Well, there's kind of a blanket, or at least consistent, if not blanket, comment to that effect. In D, the current item D, it says exactly that.
Yeah, okay. All right.
A question I have, and I'm when you define things like it's got to be 7 feet wide here and 12 feet wide there, it seems like it's already projecting what, if any, landscaping would be there. And so to me, it seems a little cart before the horse. To me, if you have, maybe there's going to be a neighborhood put in where 7 feet between the sidewalk and the curb doesn't make sense because you're really not looking for major trees to be necessarily planted there. It might be low shrubs, it might be just turf. So it kind of seems cart before the horse on saying it's got to be this wide. Well, that begs the question, well, why for what?
Oh, but if it was a PD, then you may have your own design requirements anyway,
Okay,
right?
yeah.
Well, I
But-
think
but
the argument.
This still is implying something.
We got to these because there's a value placed on basically detached walks. And
There's
then
a
that,
value on that, and there's also, those landscape strips are considered open space. So if it's open space, then, if it's open space but it can't grow anything, is it really open space? Or is it part of the parking lot?
I think it's part of a parking lot myself. I think the fact that you have a strip that is 7 feet wide, it's not like people are going to take their picnic baskets out and start pitching picnics on this open
Well,
space
it's in
in
the
the parking
right-of-way.
lot, right?
But it is, it's in the right of way, but
part
you
of the
can plant a
right-of-way.
tree on it.
All I'm saying is, to me, it
won't
seems
die.
that by putting out specific numbers, it's already necessarily, it seems to be implying a certain kind of landscaping that maybe it's not intended for. I mean, maybe it could or should be shrubs instead of trees, and I agree. I get frustrated when I see trees die over and over because they were put into a landscape strip that it didn't make sense that you'd have a narrow landscape strip and then expect to grow large trees out of it. So I'm just saying I think that some of those numbers,
What would you have instead?
I guess I mean,
With the drip lines?
Well, and if it's, what, I think what we're attempting to have by the minimum of 7 feet is if a development's coming through and they can't meet that minimum 7 feet, then we would recommend or suggest that they not have detached sidewalks. And they'd be attached sidewalks, and then they would find landscaping elsewhere within development.
The point is
along
that
certain
it
streets,
was-
I mean.
It was
you know,
determined that a less than 7 foot landscape strip is useless as a landscape strip because it can't grow things in it effectively. So there's not enough water uptake, the soil's not good enough, there's not enough room for root spread, for almost anything. Even a low 3-foot shrub will have a 9-foot radius around it of roots.
So basically, everything on Coal Creek is going to be dead in the next year or so.
On where?
On Coal Creek Drive.
Probably.
We have about a 2-foot strip.
yeah, I mean, we
That does,
have,
and I
gonna
want,
say.
yeah, and does this apply to the town or just to?
Well, see, and that's what I don't get, because
yeah, I mean,
WTF.
we landscaped on, 2-foot wide strips. So what does this mean when we know that the town did landscaping on 2-foot strips?
Well, I guess just to move the conversation along, I think if we'd like to look at the street improvement requirements as written in the code, we should take that up with either re-review the roadway, take another peek at the roadway requirements and sidewalk design requirements at some point, because I don't think we're necessarily going to resolve it here. And we're going to pull this, so we can certainly have this discussion.
Okay.
And I do have
down the
one-
road, but I think we have two additional opportunities to look at these things if you want to.
It won't be everything, the grass will grow.
Yeah. But I do have a question, though. Do neck downs, are they different, or are they considered landscape? Because what we have on Coal Creek are the attached sidewalks, and then we have a neck down, which
Right.
creates landscape. And is that different, or is that considered detached at that point and falls under this part of the code? Or if we're going to have other places in town where we have attached sidewalks with neck downs that create a landscape opportunity that they have to be defined separately, do we accommodate that here? Or do we care or need to?
Like, and PDs are certainly accommodated as necessary, or as approved independent.
And that's what the landscape strips
independent
you're talking
events.
about are, just the neck downs, right?
Yeah.
So you couldn't do a 7-foot neck down unless
Right.
you
Well, I agree.
grossly widened the street.
But we have planted trees and shrubbery,
Well,
irrigated,
we'll
They're
spend a
small.
lot of
Hopefully
money.
they're small
Actually,
trees.
the neck downs are almost 7. They are 7 feet.
One way.
Because you've got to park a car.
I don't got a
No,
problem.
with wise, they're
You
only
don't have to.
about 3 or 4
One
feet.
parks cars.
Yeah, it'll say 3 or 4
That's
feet.
that width of that neck down is the width of a
so-
parallel parking stall, isn't it?
No,
should be 9
no, the
feet.
car sticks out into the road on Coal Creek.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was sort of intentional to make that road really feel
Oh, I know.
narrow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it works well. But if we are going to, if I don't know if it's just to make sure we accommodate that type of design, if we're going to do any more of it.
I can't tell you off the top of my head if it's in the roadway or if it's in the land use code. We'll have to look.
This should just be cemented over.
Yeah.
It's a joke.
Paint designs.
Concrete.
So we've been through 2. Have we done 3 and 4 yet?
Yeah. 3 is, there was a section in the current code, 16.421, where it talks about the general layout of streets, and that was eliminated. And the reference to street design is found in the roadway design criteria. So that was eliminated by the attorneys.
Okay.
That language actually shows up.
Yeah, it pops up there. I couldn't find it because I was looking for it somewhere else in the code, and I never did find it. Matt found it over in the standards, so. Number 4 is that section 16-17, 150B. Okay, 150B. Basically went on a pathways or walks that serve both pedestrians and bicycles shall be 10 feet. And that came from parks and some of the things that we've been doing in the past, so it went from 8 feet to 10 feet. So people can pass a little bit better on a 10-foot pathway.
That's that width though doesn't actually take into account the occasional landscape truck that's required to give 3 feet of room to a bicyclist by law in Colorado.
They need to stop.
You mean the maintenance guy?
Yeah.
I don't know, does that apply on
Good point.
a maintenance truck apply on a pathway? I don't think
It's a motor vehicle passing a bicyclist.
Well, if he's passing him, yeah. I mean, to me, we're not dealing with a car in an open road. We're dealing with a maintenance vehicle on a pathway. And they're out there in a much different mode than the guy who's driving his car on a public way.
Doesn't matter to the pedestrian.
I've almost hit several pedestrians on these narrow paths. That's all I'm saying.
In your maintenance vehicle?
Driving your car.
Maintenance vehicle.
Yeah, my maintenance vehicle.
Okay.
No, it does beg the question, though. I mean, if all this is to keep you from getting sued and the requirements are met and blah, 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 there's a state law that says a vehicle passing a car has to give it 3 feet. I mean, passing a bike has to give it 3 feet. So a 10-foot wide path doesn't do that.
That's for
Depends what kind of car you're driving.
on street.
That's a on-street, so I say it's a public, on a public
I
way.
don't know that that's true. It just says vehicles in, it may be. All I'm saying is look at it. Because if it's not, then we got to think about how to deal with that.
Well, one of the things is you want to get to a place where you don't invite traffic onto pathways that shouldn't have traffic.
Right.
15-foot might just
Yeah, exactly.
by traffic.
Go out there and use your rough
I'll do
terrain
it,
tires on the grass.
You with
So,
the yellow
okay,
light
well,
on
if
Jesus
you
Christ.
if you wouldn't mind looking into that, that's fine. Number 5.
That was number 5. No,
That
no, I'm
was
sorry.
four.
That was
So
number 4.
Do we address electric scooters, and does that fall into this at all?
Is it still against the? Yeah, is it still against the?
Well, the board,
Isn't that being addressed or something?
Yeah.
That's in the middle.
golf
cart.
Be under the
seg-
traffic
not golf
code.
carts,
Golf cart,
segways, and electric bicycles were just reviewed by the board.
Electric, okay. Do scooters have?
Not powered scooters.
If they're, if
I
they're
don't know if that was
operating-
in there, I'd have to go back and look, but I know
If they're
segways and electric
Electric
bicycles.
bikes.
But
I
don't know
almost
about
killed a
those.
kid the other night on he was coming off of Coleridge on one of those gas powered two-wheeled scooters,
Right.
dressed in black.
Yeah.
Coming off of Coleridge onto Rock Creek Parkway at full speed, just right through the stop sign. I was turning left from Rock Creek Parkway onto Coleridge. Never saw him until he was past me. I mean, if I had taken the corner any differently than I did, I would have killed that kid dead.
Well, those scooters are already illegal in the city, in the town.
Yeah,
All right.
if, I think at least you have to have a license.
Well-
So the kids aren't supposed to be running around on them at all.
Board just
Well, it's in there.
approved an ordinance with regard to electric vehicles on,
No, this is gas.
oh, this is.
Well, they
gas.
can
That's
be
the ones I
electric.
usually see. Yeah,
They
there's
can-
both.
There's scooters that are electric.
Well, state law's under 80 cc's. You don't need a license, right?
Right.
So kids can ride those. Do we have a different law in town?
No.
I'll forward to you what the board recently reviewed. I don't remember if
I think it's
it,
under
it was just
55.
electric vehicles.
Under
It
55.
wasn't gas powered. So,
Does that kind of stuff impact Chapter 16 or not? Really?
No, that occurs usually in your vehicle code, I mean, in your
motor vehicle.
in your motor vehicle code.
What about? But I mean, what about electric vehicles that can use these paths that we're talking about?
As far as the width, the requirements for the width of the path?
No, he's talking about the use.
Well, we're talking about pathways that serve both bicycles and pedestrians. Are we going to allow them to?
Well, I think those falls.
Serve
Wouldn't that
electric
be your administrative
vehicles.
rules for parks? Is that, you got a pathway in town, it's a public way. You're going to have rules as to what kind of vehicles can be on that. You
Well,
can run, you can bike, you
It'll
can
be,
walk.
it's in the definition that they use to identify which vehicles they're allowed and not allowed. So I'll have to go back and look at the language.
I just don't see it as current in zoning, Bob. It's more like it's a procedure or use rule of your public open spaces that Parks has to basically deal with. I mean, let's say you go on the Strand in California, you got walkers, you got bikers, you've got people on
Rollerblades.
Skateboards.
Skateboards, and then now there are signs. There's, skateboards prohibited, that's what's going to happen. That's the way you administer, these pathways in terms of use. And it's not really a zoning thing, it's an administrative thing.
Why is it always the skateboards that get prohibited?
Skateboarding. Okay, can we move on
Leap
to
on people. So we'll take a look at those two items.
number 5?
5 is, there was before, on 16-160, there was a blanket disapproval or a prohibition of a gated development. Now it's under, here, it's discretionary, because we do have a gated community in town, which is in Rock Creek up there.
And as soon as we build Guardian, we're going to have a second one.
Right.
We already have another one. We already have another one in the storage unit that's there.
Yeah.
They have a gate.
That language seems awfully vague, though.
I know, it's almost like, why bother having it
Gated
then?
development.
But you could still come forth with a PD and it could be approved as a gated community, right?
So
any
At
of
whose
these things have
discretion?
changed.
Yeah, when you say approved by
Well,
the town, are there
we
other
could just
examples?
clarify town board.
Well,
25?
I was going to say.
That was the
4,
intention there.
like these.
yeah, I mean, it,
Because they approved
approved through the
last-
process,
Yeah.
ultimately it ends up at the town board and it's approved.
4.5.
Yeah.
That's what that means, that approved by the town, is it's encompassing all the procedure and everything you go through to get to the point where it's approved.
Okay.
We'll add
Just,
that.
You can put
it's
it
kind
town
of
board,
given.
we could do that.
Yeah, I mean, unless
This
there's
one-
another
this one.
precedent, it still comes across as pretty
This,
vague, whatever
yeah.
the intent was.
It's usually that. So I can see that.
Okay.
Okay.
number
Last
6.
one is subsection 160C, paren C, this deletion, what did they do here?
It looks like they want to retain it and reword it.
C4.
Yeah, can you pull up the original
Oh,
language?
I know what's going on here. Sorry. I think this came from Parks Department, where you basically got an 8-foot wide deal, and then they mow 3 feet on the side of it, so the vegetation doesn't encroach on the trail and all that, and that's what that is meant,
Okay.
and what I'm saying, what we came up with, is that the deletion should be retained and then reworded so it's clear. I mean, this sentence is confusing, is what, so we can do that later.
Cool.
So
Okay,
should
let's,
we pull that?
well, it's pulled anyway. We've
Yeah.
already pulled the
Right.
entire section, but
Okay.
you can make a note on that one to rewrite that for,
Right.
For the
Right.
meeting notes.
yeah.
Yeah. I don't think the attorneys understood what was going on there. And we didn't catch it in advance, so there we are.
Okay, no, good catch.
That takes us to Article 20, which is utilities.
18.
And here, this is, pardon me, 18, which is Article 20 of the current code. And so Section 1618-70 combines Sections 16448 through 16451 of the current code with no loss of technical content. All right? All of this introductory stuff is the same.
Does the roadway design piece, does it reference utilities specifically in the roadway design pieces, like storm drainage and things like that?
Required depth for electrical and separation of.
I guess really the point of my question is just about making sure the same thing that we're talking about in 17, where you have maybe technical requirements
Reference to other
are
places.
are also referenced in relation to Article 18 here.
Well, it starts right off, number 1618-10. Is that what you're referring to? All utilities installed in public or private rights-of-way shall comply with Chapter 11 of the code, which is Chapter 11 of the municipal code, which is all the utility installation.
All right, so that's the guiding document for the utilities.
Yeah,
Chapter 11 is right. Is
right.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
This is on chapter 16, so that's all in chapter.
But again,
Then there
I
was
guess
a
with the
section,
numbers-
that kind of, in this utility section, we had, at one point in our land use code would be section 16453. We added some material in there about sites for screening of central trash receptacles, and somehow that got lost. And so I couldn't find it, Matt couldn't find it.
Yeah.
So we need to put that back in because that has to do with our general rules about dealing with these types of things. And if it needs to be improved, that's something we could think about too, I guess. But
I'd like
it has to
see
do
you-
with that we've always wanted to have these areas screened and all that kind of stuff done properly.
Right. So yes,
So
it should be added back.
We need to put that back in.
Yep.
So it is in 162330. All trash receptacles shall be screened.
Right.
Of the revi.
Where do you see it?
It's in the compare document in 16-23-30,
Oh, okay.
and it's tied in with the trash and recycling areas.
I see where it went.
Is there a
yeah, there it
requirement
is.
For multifamily to have recycling areas?
Oh, good call.
I'm not sure why it's in the utilities section anyway.
Yeah.
So
No.
I think it's fine.
Okay,
not
well, this
having
is
it.
fine. We'll pick it up when we get to 23 then. I never did figure that out. Okay.
They're
Okay.
probably
So
not
it's
the same
gone.
thing.
So it's
Master
Smooth.
stretch.
now in
Good job.
section 1620.
Good. So,
You wanna
just
add
really
something?
quickly though, Fred, I
That's
guess
a
while
good
we're tackling the same thing with road standards, does Chapter 11 have, for example, all of the numbers that are listed in section 16, 18, 20?
For
Is there
easement,
a-
the easements and things.
Easement standards. I guess I just want to make sure as you guys are reviewing potential overlap and I guess future opportunities for disagreement between redundant documents, whether that still makes sense or not.
We can check that out. I mean, I'm not familiar with Chapter 11, to be honest with you.
And there may be a good reason to have some of the kind of top level stuff listed. This seems like kind of an overview of what basic standards are as opposed to detailed requirements, but same issues, I guess, as the road standards. Is there a reason the road standards wouldn't have been pulled in as a chapter
11?
of the code rather than and managed just like everything else? Out of curiosity.
That's a good question.
Well,
I don't know.
That is a
that
good
along with the District 1 water, sewer, and storm regulations, that's a whole separate referenced, similar to the roadway design criteria.
Okay.
And just the sheer volume of the requirements in there, I think is why they were broken out separately rather than incorporated into Chapter 16.
Okay. I guess management-wise, I'd be curious to hear if there's, I mean, nowadays, it's easy enough to either give somebody an electronic copy of a chapter or have separate chapters printed out, so if, I don't know, unless there's another reason why those are potentially managed separately, that's the concern, is that they're things that are just as legitimately quantitative and substantial as other chapters in the code. It seems like something that ought to be in there just so that it gets treated the same way.
Yeah.
I don't know. Let me know if you think of another reason.
Okay. Yeah.
But we'll go, I mean, well,
This is
we
going to
don't know
apply.
how far you want to dig into the municipal code, but I mean, I think we need, what we're doing is cross-referencing Chapter 11, make sure, it's doing what it's supposed to do
Yep.
from a zoning standpoint.
Yeah, and this is kind of outside the rest of the discussion. It's just it's striking me as odd that something just
Well,
as
I think
technical
this is
and
going to
referenced as
be used with current infrastructure also, rather than just developments.
When you go to resurface a street, you have to refer to that book to make sure you're getting the right depth and the right compaction and the right blah blah blah. Whereas when you're
it's more as much an engineering document as a code document.
yeah, and it really, I mean, every code book would then be 6 inches thick instead of 4 inches thick.
Yeah, and that's, if there's just a practical standpoint that you are required by law to have umpteen paper copies of your entire code laying around, and that's the reason, that's fine. I just want to make sure.
Okay.
follow through on that. Okay. That gets us to Article
19?
19, which is signs. And basically, we went through this, as you're well aware. We spent some time on that. And then what popped out to me is how we deal with billboards. And we added in some language to deal with billboards, but we also needed to deal with the fact that monument signs, which is an off-premise sign, have been allowed and are being allowed through license agreements, like in the right-of-way. And the language that was used to do that, in my view, is a little bit convoluted. I mean, what we don't want are billboards. We know what a billboard is, and I think it needs to be defined in such a way that it's clear. But a billboard is not a monument sign, although a monument sign may be off-site under a license agreement, and the only reason it gets off-site is because it goes off the property, or parts of it are off the property in the right-of-way.
Right.
That's the only off-premise, quote-unquote, off-premise sign.
I thought we
really
added
allow.
language to the code that said specifically billboards are prohibited.
Yeah, I don't recall that specific, it makes sense, but I don't recall the specific discussion about billboards.
Well, we need to clear that up, because
Okay.
I think we know what we want. I don't think the language now is convoluted, but it does what we need to do. It allows us to do an off-premise sign without our license agreement in the right-of-way.
Which we don't have any
It's
problem
really
with.
convoluted. And so we need to fix that.
Okay.
We don't have any billboards in the town now, right?
No.
Right. So
No, but we do allow the signs that talk about who the players are at the marketplace that run along Marshall Road.
yeah, those are the
Could be
monument
considered-
signs.
They could be considered billboards, however, according to the code, or according to what Fred is saying.
Right. So
Well, our code says billboards unless they're located on property that is part of a single development project.
That's
for
the
example,
edit they're
Mark.
recommending pulling.
Well, we're fixing.
Or
Did
fix
it, so it
Not
originally
pulling,
just
but
said
fix it.
billboards?
we should just reference it that billboards are not allowed in the town, period, right?
We need to define billboards.
Yeah, you need to do
We
it.
need to define what a monument
Right,
sign is.
and the problem
That's what
is
I'm
the general
thinking.
definition for a billboard is,
Say
they don't
that's
even, they don't
accepted.
talk about large signs on poles or nothing. It's sort of, something is advertised off-site. And where you get run into a problem then definition-wise is that you got a monument sign. Technically, it's off-site, but it's a monument sign. It's not a billboard, as we know of what a billboard is. So I think
So
we
you're
need to
gonna,
go.
we're gonna pull this and you're gonna
Yeah, we're going
rewrite
to pull this
Okay.
and redefine billboard, and then deal with this other language too. So that, those two,
And
One and
one and
two.
two, right?
actually 1 through 3 kind of go together.
So Fred, for a sign, and I just want to confirm this is, I'm thinking this correctly, that if, for example, the development over here with Old Chicago's and the coffee shop and all that wanted to put a sign out on the street,
Facing 36 or something.
or no, just even on McCaslin for that matter, just so that you could identify what,
Where they need one.
that would be, oh, they do that way. I'm trying to get them to come talk to us, but that would be a monument sign, correct?
Yes.
Because it might
Right.
sit in the right of
Yes.
way. We'd give them permission to put it
Yes.
there, they'd pay for it,
Right,
build
it'd be
it.
of a certain size and so on.
Okay.
Yes. That would
Be
be
a
a
monument,
monument
and
sign,
we
not
would
a
require a
billboard.
monument.
But it could be considered, given the way the language is written now, it could be considered a billboard in that it advertises the businesses that are there
Offsite.
off-site, so not attached to the wall,
Right.
whatever.
Not a primary use of the property.
Not on their property.
My question to you is,
Unlike weed up here, which is on their property.
Correct.
is the sign outside
Actually, that's
town
in the
hall
right
a
of way.
billboard or a monument sign?
Oh, no.
Do we really want to?
That's actually a billboard.
Yeah, right. It should be removed.
Illegal in all ways.
We just had to get our dig in.
Yeah.
Platinum removing elimination, yep.
All right, then the last one.
Electrical pulsations.
The only other thing is that 1619-160 paren B paren 3, we added a couple of items in there that, when they come in with a sign plan, we thought these little couple of items were missing. So we threw those in. We need to know their colors and their lighting and so on.
so that's no big deal. Otherwise, this section is the same in general that we've had.
Does enforcement of these fall, when's that live, with our code enforcement officer, is that one?
Yeah,
Okay.
correct.
So these signs that are put up around town that are just, I mean, they're permitted, the small,
Yeah,
The
the
road
code
cars and
enforcement
things like
officer,
those.
and then also our Parks and Public Works field staff, if they see them and they've noticed that they've been there for, more than 2 days, they'll go ahead and pull them.
do they ever call the number and?
Yeah,
They're
we
responsible for
pull them,
pulling
we
them?
call the number and let them know that we have pulled them and why and where they can find them. But
You
they
send them
never
a bill?
come and pick them
No,
up.
obviously not a fine, not a fine.
We hold on to them for about a week and then we throw them away.
So I have a question to understand. I think it's a banner. So if you look at the dental office that's down past Chuck E. Cheese and all that, the new one that went up, and there's a big
It's a banner, it's not, yeah.
big
it's a
banner that sits up, way up on the corner of the building. Not exactly like someone's going to go up there and pull it, but that thing's been up there, I think, for months, right? So that would be outside of this 30 days
Well, there's a
duration.
temporary banner permit that a business can,
Cool.
they can get for four, they can have 4 banners a year.
There's also
But I'll follow up on that.
similar
Well, but that's what we're talking about, right?
similar banner down at the Safeway.
Yeah.
It's been up for months because it's been up so long.
I
It's
noticed
pulled
that
away
one
from
today.
its
Yeah.
it's pulled away from 2 of its stretching supports.
Flat, right?
Which is,
Yeah, it's flapping.
Wooden
Yeah.
mode.
Yeah.
And typically, if we go by and tell them they need to take it down or get a permit and they don't do it, we just go and, if we can, yank it down. But that one's higher up, so, but, and then if we have to, we issue them a citation and get them in
You
court.
probably want to let them know
Get the bucket truck out.
what the procedure is before you yank it down. Because those things aren't cheap.
No?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fine to advertise. I think some of it's been
Stupidity
too
is
long.
there. Oh wait,
Okay.
I gotta go.
Goodbye, James.
All this sign is the nemesis of communities dealing with, a lot, there's so many little things that can happen that it's a real challenge to keep it under control and enforce in any size of community that's got anything going on at all. Just sort of part of the business day, almost. Take down a sign or something.
Okay.
We didn't get as far as we thought we would on bringing articles to you. We had a short week because of Thanksgiving, but President, good job.
We didn't do too bad.
No.
This is a good meeting. Okay. Anything
Yeah,
else?
we're up,
Anyone?
We're up to Article 20, so.
Oh, just, is anyone
Moving right
going to
along.
miss the 15th? Anyone not?
I think I'm here.
That's the next meeting, right?
I have one thing,
15th?
John, I wanted to bring
I
up.
may end up with a
Sorry, what?
business
I have one thing I want to bring up.
Oh, you go ahead.
So, I mean, the little presentation this evening about home rule, do
Huh?
we want to, I mean, he did ask, there was a request that he made for us to support home rule. I don't know what we do with that, if anything, but we'll respond to it, or,
It's an interesting thing, and I guess will there be something come to the commission for us to review the pros and cons of home rule and make a advisory recommendation to the board one way or the other, based on land use code and issues and or is it
Did
just?
he even make statements that were accurate?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't know the answer.
yeah, the couple examples you gave were accurate.
I mean,
yeah, and
I don't know the nuance of.
The last I heard from the mayor that was actually publicly made was that he was looking for a citizen-driven effort, and maybe there's a citizen-driven effort in play. I don't know. And it sounds like he's going to talk to the board. And
But I think in relation to the responsibilities and purview of the planning commission? If this is something the town is going to consider, which obviously they are already, it's on the agenda. Maybe maybe we should weigh in on it from a pros and cons standpoint in relation to planning and land use.
If the town were going to do anything, we would need to get the process started in January, as far as looking at ballot language and letting the county know and getting the whole, for the April election. So the board, I'll have to look to see when they were going to look at proposed ballot language for April and decide what they wanted to do, and see if home rule is part of that. It's one of the things they were considering, in addition to a number of items for April.
You have to have the charter, though, available by that point in time if they're going to vote?
No, April will be whether or not to elect a charter commission.
Oh.
And if you want to elect a charter commission, you elect the people to be on that charter commission. So, but yeah, if it looks like we're going to have a home rule election, I think it would make sense to look at. We've done a whole bunch of research and stuff on home rule and pros and cons and stuff.
If
like
it's
that.
if it's if they're doing their research, then I know it wasn't part of our work plan that we submitted, but if there are planning and or land use issues related to home rule, we should weigh in on them.
The issue
Surely there is.
The legal, it's a legal question because our planning and zoning is basically regulated, based in state statute as a statutory town. Under home rule, there are probably some different things that you can do.
Yeah, it would affect,
And so definitely, there could be future impact on the zoning rules, or, the land use code.
They were also looking at, one of the hot topics for home rule was getting our election date changed from April to November. And there's a statute that allows us just to make that one change without going home rule. So they were looking at that possibility too, instead of going home rule, which may be the direction they said to go.
From an advisory role standpoint, I think it would be good for the commission to provide our opinion of the pros and cons of the issues that affect, again, planning and land use to the board, and so that they can make a decision about whether to put forth a ballot measure. And it would just be one more piece of information for them.
I mean, it's crazy for us to have hotel or hotels in here. I mean, we just wouldn't be able to collect any reasonable amount of revenue that other towns do without that. And, if we're planning on building this out and possibly putting a hotel over here, I mean, that alone could drive the benefits. I so far what I've heard, I am probably leaning in favor of it if it's written well. I mean, you can write it pretty close to what we have today if we care to. And making only the modifications that we thought were important.
And so there's something in being a statutory town that prohibits any kind of
Room tax.
any kind of a room
Yeah.
tax is.
Yeah.
We also don't collect our own sales tax, so we don't have, we depend on other entities, right, to ensure that we receive
Well, it's collected by
our
the
share.
state. Yeah.
We don't have any control over that, we have some review, I assume. but-
Yeah, we can request one audit a year for one business, which isn't,
Oh.
and whether you get it.
You can request.
You can request. But
keyword.
as you can imagine, they get quite a few requests a year. So, yeah, it's a limitation.
Okay.
Good to know.
Anything else? Bob, is that the only thing?
I'm good with that.
Okay. All right. We'll adjourn the work session.
All righty.
Yeah, but those are just good.